Ian Pryor. He is the former spokesman at the Department of Justice, title of Deputy Director of Public Affairs, former Communications Director for American Crossroads. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
What is your biggest takeaway from what we know right now?
Well, I don't think it can be said enough, right? I mean, Bob Mueller, the former head of the FBI, led a 2-year investigation with a staff of mostly Democrats and came back without charging any American with conspiring with Russia to interfere with our elections or any American to obstruct justice. So I think the upshot here is this is a great day for the president. Perhaps more importantly, it's a great day for Americans. Not such a good day for the anti-Trump cartel who thought that Bob Mueller was going to be the Trump slayer.
So, Ian, looking at moving forward here, there has been a massive distrust based on this investigation, looking at how the FBI behaved leading up to this investigation, the potential FISA abuse that we've seen with reporting from Catherine Herridge yesterday, with the DOJ being concerned about biased sources driving FISA warrant applications. How does Bill Barr, the Attorney General, move forward and reestablishing trust inside of the Justice Department with the American people, as Democrats say they may be covering things up by not releasing all of the report, and by a number of people being very concerned about reforms that are necessary so this doesn't happen again?
Well, I think that's something that's going to be very important to Barr. I think this is a good first step. I thought also yesterday there was a report that the Inspector General is continuing to investigate the FISA issue. And as we know from the Clinton investigation with the Inspector General, sometimes that takes time. So I think they will wait on that. I don't know when that will come out, but when that does, then they will start making decisions. And, there could very well be criminal referrals after the Inspector General report. We don't know.
Ian, we've spent the better part of the first 2 years of the Trump presidency talking about this. We now have the report. We'll learn what's in it shortly. What should the American people take away from what's been done in our institutions in this investigation over the last 2 years?
Well, I think that they can be confident that this Department of Justice is not going to do things like the Obama Department of Justice did. From the beginning, this investigation, clearly with Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and Andy McCabe, very suspect, obviously, to say the least. But once it got into this Department of Justice, with Rosenstein exercising oversight over Mueller, clearly they ran this investigation fairly. They were not out to get the president. They were out to do what was right. And now what we have, I think, is a political gift for the president, because you have all these Democrats for 2 years that have been talking about how the president was an agent of Russia, how the president was obstructing justice, how the president was going to shut down the Mueller investigation. Guess what? That's all BS. And this investigation showed that. And the report, well, I don't think it's going to be the roadmap to impeachment that Democrats think it's going to be. I think it's going to be far more sparse than that. I think this is a good day, like I said, for the president, a better day for the United States of America.
Ian, you make a number of important points. We heard from Democrat after Democrat. We must pass a bill, the Protect Bob Mueller Act, because this president's going to fire him. Never, ever happened. Allow this investigation to come to a completion, as you say. But you also invoke the name of Andy McCabe. So let's hear from McCabe and others who have been pushing this anti-Trump narrative, and we'll talk on the other side.
Do you still believe the president could be a Russian asset?
I think it's possible. I think that's why we started our investigation. And I'm really anxious to see where Director Mueller concludes that.
More and more, I come to the conclusion that after the Helsinki performance and since, that I really do wonder whether the Russians have something on him.
I use the term that this is nothing short of treasonous because it is a betrayal of the nation. He is giving aid and comfort to the enemy.
Ian, you gave them the benefit of the doubt by saying maybe they weren't out to get him. They did a fair investigation. What if they were out to get him, which it looks like, and they still didn't find anything?
Well, when I said Rosenstein and Mueller weren't out to get them, as far as McCabe, Page, Strzok, I mean, clearly they made decisions and then they tried to fill in those decisions with facts that didn't exist. And that's ultimately the real issue here. I mean, you had John Brennan, who was the former head of the CIA, just a few weeks ago, saying that there were going to be surprise indictments. Well, if you go back to the Russian indictments from February and July of last year, it said no Americans willingly participated in any kind of conspiracy or that there was no evidence of that. It's kind of amazing that the former head of the CIA couldn't figure that out by going back and reading those indictments.
So Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein is now staying on longer at the Department of Justice. There was some controversy with him throughout this process. The allegations that he mentioned the 25th Amendment, that was, of course, made by Andrew McCabe, who has been referred to the U.S. Attorney in Washington, D.C. for criminal investigation over lying. Do you think Rod Rosenstein is going to have to explain further his comments about the 25th Amendment in this instance?
I don't know. It depends on if he gets called to testify in front of Congress. I know that he's had conversations with the president. The president has made statements about those conversations. One thing with McCabe, I think a few weeks ago, he went on one show, he said one thing, then he had to come back the next day and say, well, wait a minute. These weren't multiple conversations, as I said 2 nights ago. It was really just in passing, which is pretty much what Rosenstein said. So I think when it comes to Andy McCabe, pretty much everything he says you have to take with a grain of salt.
Well, Ian Pryor, former spokesman of the Justice Department, we appreciate your insight.
Well
really breaking it down extremely well this morning. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
Well, someone else who's called it as they see it is the president of Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton, who's been at the forefront of exposing corruption within the FBI and the Justice Department. Tom, good morning. We want to get your response to the Mueller report being done and where we go from here.
Well, the political consequences of any dossier-like garbage that Mueller's partisans try to put into the report aside, it's a major vindication for the president. The fundamentals behind the Mueller appointment, the collusion story, has collapsed. And I know Democrats are going to argue about transparency, and we're going to have transparency. That's a side argument. But President Trump is much better off today than he was yesterday. And in my view, we need to move on, but not from accountability here, because, you know, we've had this operation by Mr. Mueller going on for well over a year now unnecessarily. They concluded, I will guarantee you, they've had no substantial evidence since a year plus ago that there was any Russia collusion. Certainly there was no obstruction. Yet this operation was allowed to distort our constitutional republic for a year plus and harass the president and impede on his duties as president, impact the conduct of our foreign policy, all as part of a Democratic Party operation. And for the Democrats in Congress, in my view, they're as conflicted as anyone else involved in this attack on President Trump. Because remember, it was their party, the Democratic National Committee, that concocted this dossier that was the fundamental basis not only for the Mueller investigation, but the improprieties by the Justice Department and the FBI in terms of the spying and other activities targeting President Trump.
Paid for by the DNC and the Clinton camp.
Well, exactly. So, you know, their party's credibility is on the line here. So their cries about transparency are should be taken as anyone else with a conflicted interest in this.
And you know who else's credibility is on the line? The FISA court. Now, the FISA court, many of us civil libertarians have been concerned about it because it hears one-sided information. It trusts the government to tell the truth. Now we know the government didn't tell the truth. It withheld critical information. I want to see the FISA court itself open up an investigation of the people who submitted the report for contempt of court.
James Comey, people at the Justice Department
Whoever was responsible for not disclosing the source of the dossier misled the court. If I were representing a defendant, I'd be up there in 2 minutes seeking contempt proceedings, seeking to strike it, seeking to invoke the Fourth Amendment. But the American public must be able to trust that FISA court.
Tom, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, but quickly, the president now needs to take steps to be transparent there. Mueller, there's no more excuse in terms of interfering with the Mueller operation. And frankly, Al and I disagree slightly. The FISA court has been part of the problem here.
Agreed.
We exposed how, despite the government coming in and asking for 4 spy applications targeting President Trump and his team, they held not one hearing about it. And they know what's been going on here, and they've taken no steps. So we just have to figure out a better way in terms of allowing the executive branch to conduct these so-called spying operations while providing a check. The courts have provided no check, and it's part of the problem.
Look, I've made a suggestion. The FISA court ought to appoint 4 lawyers who get security clearance, who act as the devil's advocate. You know, when the Catholic Church wants to make somebody a saint, they appoint the devil's advocate to argue the opposing point of view.
right.
That's what ought to happen here.
Yeah.
4 people with security clearance coming in and saying, no, you shouldn't issue this report. This application is flawed. Today, you don't have anybody on the other side. So the one good thing about this whole thing is you conservatives are now becoming civil libertarians. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for finally seeing the light.
I want to get to you with Tom real quickly on what Democrats are saying. Brian Fallon, who worked for Hillary Clinton in 2016, has said, look, the Mueller report may be ending. This is what he tweeted. Whatever is in the Mueller report, it ain't over till the Southern District of New York. But
he wrote sovereign.
District of New York.
It is
It's the Southern
sovereign.
District of New York sings. So Democrats are now banking on the Southern District of New York, bringing charges against the president and his associates. What do you have to say about that?
Well, you know, the abuse, the baton was handed over in terms of abuse from the DOJ and FBI to Mueller. Now the baton they want to have the Southern District pursue. Remember, the U.S. attorney there, the political appointee, recused himself, so you got essentially the deep state running the Southern District investigation. But, you know, I'm glad Mrs. Clinton is back here and her spokesman is back here because they need to be asked questions about what they knew and when about this FISA process. Mrs. Clinton is as responsible for what went on here as anyone else here in Washington, D.C. And, you know, frankly, you know, the left is going around tearing down statues of politicians from the 1800s, but we're not allowed to ask what Hillary Clinton did and what she was involved in 2 years ago in this abuse targeting President Trump. This was as big a loss again for Hillary Clinton as it was for President Trump. So, look, the Southern District of New York, Alan is right. The harassment of President Trump will continue, but this big lie, and it was a knowing lie put out by Democrats, it was partisan, that he was involved in treason and collusion with Russia, has collapsed. So if they want to pursue low-rent, harassing investigations of President Trump, I guess that's what they'll do. But it should be given with the same skepticism as the other big lies they've been pursuing for the last 3 years.
Is that where they go? Low-rent Southern District?
Well, already what they've done is made life miserable for so many people who were close to the president when they went after these people. And look, these people committed crimes. Manafort, as Judge Ellis said, they were never interested in Manafort. They just wanted to get him to sing or compose. They weren't interested in Cohen. They weren't interested in Stone. These are just efforts to try to get at the president. That's the way special counsel operate, because they come in with a mandate to find crimes against somebody who has a target on their back. I hope that won't continue. I hope we'll have ordinary investigations in the course of events, not targeting people because of their political affiliation or closeness to the president.
All right. Well, Tom Fitton and Alan Dershowitz, thank you so much for being here this morning. Really appreciate your insight. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys.
Former Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski. Corey, good morning. Your response.
That smile doesn't lie, Corey.
Well, look, the walls are clearly not closing in, and this is a clear vindication. And what I was excited about this morning is when I woke up and the New York Times headline was, "We're sorry, Mr. Trump. We're sorry, Trump family." Oh, of course that will never happen. We will never see the apology from the mainstream media for all the things they said to malign this president about this fake Russia collusion witch hunt. The fact that Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell have been on every media outlet for the last 1 year, 10 months, and 6 days saying that they have proof of Russia collusion has now all fallen apart. And I'm very, very ready to see the apology from all of those leftists, all the socialists who accused us of crimes when the real crimes that were perpetuated were against us because of our political beliefs.
So, Corey, I appreciate that, and you're right, but there will be no apology. Yet they will move the goalposts. What do you predict comes next? Because they can't stop hating the president.
I think what's going to come next is they're going to say, well, the Mueller report was not the final. It's just the jumping off point. And now we have to have continued investigations, and we must turn the rest of this over to the Southern District of New York. And you heard Alan Dershowitz and Tom Fenton talk about this. The bottom line is the Mueller investigators did not find one individual who colluded with Russia from the campaign. There was not one indictment as it related to that. And don't forget, these are the same individuals who tried to get Dr. Jerome Corsi to sign a plea deal so that he would plead guilty to something he never did. They used Gestapo-type tactics against Americans because they didn't like our politics. But now the liberals on the left will say that we have to wait for the Southern District of New York to see if they're going to prosecute, or maybe there's something from the state of New York with the Trump Foundation. They will never let this go. They will overstep, and they will continue to move impeachment proceedings against this president for him doing nothing but fighting for Americans.
Corey, you talk about Gestapo tactics, as you say. Particularly, you talked about Jerome Corsi. He is an associate of Roger Stone and put out this statement. I feel vindicated. They offered me a plea deal, which I thought was fraudulent. I did not knowingly and willfully give them information I knew was false. The fact is, I wasn't going to lie to keep myself out of prison. I did nothing wrong. It is clear I did nothing wrong, or they would have prosecuted me. You can jump in on that, but more broadly, I spoke to another Trump ally like yourself overnight who told me that once this report is out there, the gloves are going to come off, because it's not just Jerome Corsi. There's a whole bunch of other people who feel that they were pressured by Robert Mueller and his people to lie about the president.
Ed, it's cost individuals hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend themselves against crimes that they didn't commit. This was a clear overreach by the U.S. government, people in power who use their badges and their guns to go after people at the Trump campaign because they didn't like our politics, from Jim Comey to Andy McCabe. And what no one is talking about, what no one wants to remind everyone, is that this entire report was fabricated because Hillary Clinton lost the election and took $5 million of her campaign money and hired a former British spy to create this false dossier. Jim Comey should be held accountable for his abuse of power. And what you and I both think is probably pretty egregious is his op-ed in the New York Times that he said, well, look, when the report comes out, it will probably show there was no collusion. It's amazing how we just had the fortuitous timing to put that out right as the report was coming.
Corey, speaking of, the timing on that is very suspicious. But speaking of moving forward here, you talk about government overreach. Democrats have issued 80-plus subpoenas for individuals and organizations associated with President Trump. They did it because they said they couldn't wait for the Mueller report to be finished. It is now finished. They will continue to move forward with those subpoenas. How do you think the White House can react and the campaign can react to that investigation that is now coming?
Well, I have to be very clear. I was one of the 81 people who they asked for information from, and I have no information to give them. I've been clear. I've testified in front of Congress. They can go and read my transcripts. I spent 12 hours in front of the House. That's publicly. That's all available to the committee members. There is no additional information. And with all due respect to Chairman Nadler, this is clearly a fishing expedition between what he's doing, what Richard Neal is doing from the Ways and Means Committee trying to get the president's taxes, and what Adam Schiff is doing at the Intelligence Committee trying to continue people to pressure them to turn against the president, to fabricate stories that don't exist. They will continue to overreach, and we will see that at the ballot box in November of 2020, because this Mueller report has clearly vindicated the president and our entire team that there was no collusion.
Corey
Lewandowski,
enjoy this Saturday. Appreciate it. Corey Lewandowski, appreciate it.
Thank you.